The number was $23,400. She knew it exactly. Not approximately, not roughly, exactly. The way you know a number when you have been avoiding looking at it directly for 2 years, but somehow it lives in the back of every single thought anyway. Credit card 1. Credit card 2. A personal loan she took out to cover a gap between jobs. A medical bill from 18 months ago that she kept meaning to deal with. $23,400 in New York City, on a salary that covered rent and groceries and the subway and not much else. And the minimum payments kept the collectors quiet but did absolutely nothing to move the number. Every month she paid. Every month the number stayed. This is where most debt stories begin. Not with recklessness, with survival. With the slow accumulation of gaps between what life costs in a city that never gets cheaper and what a starting salary actually produces. With one emergency that required a card. Then a second emergency. Then a third. Then a period of time where the cards were the only thing standing between her and a situation she could not let herself think about too clearly. The debt was not the result of luxury. It was the result of living in one of the most expensive cities in the world on an income that had not caught up yet. And it had arrived so gradually and been managed so quietly that by the time she was genuinely staring at the number, it felt less like a mistake and more like a condition. Something that was simply part of her life now, the way the subway delays were part of her life. Unavoidable, constant, background noise that occasionally became deafening. The first thing that had to change was not the number. It was the relationship with the number. Most people in debt spend enormous energy not looking at it. The avoidance is understandable. Looking directly at a number that large produces a specific kind of dread that the brain quickly learns to root around. But avoidance has a financial cost that is less visible than the balance itself. When you cannot look at the number clearly, you cannot make accurate decisions about it. You pay minimums because minimums are the only thing the avoidance allows. You do not optimize. You do not strategize. You just survive the month and try not to think about the total. The shift begins with looking. Not with a plan, not with a solution, just with a clear, undefended accounting of what exists. Every balance, every interest rate, every minimum payment. Written down in one place in order. This is the moment the number stops being a weight you carry invisibly and becomes a problem with specific components that can be addressed in a specific sequence. The sequence matters enormously. Most people pay debt in the order it appears on their statements, or in the order that feels most emotionally urgent, or based on whoever sent the most recent letter. None of these approaches optimize for the actual cost of the debt. The two methods that do are the Avalanche and the Snowball, and understanding the difference between them is the difference between paying for 3 years longer than necessary and not. The Avalanche method directs every available dollar above minimum payments toward the highest interest rate debt first. Mathematically, this is the most efficient approach. It minimizes total interest paid over the life of the debt. The Snowball method directs extra payments toward the smallest balance first, regardless of interest rate. This is slightly less efficient mathematically, but significantly more effective psychologically. Because paying off a balance completely, even a small one, produces a genuine behavioral signal that the problem is solvable. The research consistently shows that for most people, the Snowball produces better real-world outcomes despite being mathematically inferior, because motivation is not a constant. The Avalanche works better on paper. The Snowball works better for people, because people need to feel progress in order to continue making progress. The best method is the one you will maintain for 2 years. The second thing that had to change was the income-to-debt ratio. Paying debt on the income she currently had would take a predictable number of years. Every additional dollar applied to debt above the minimum reduced that timeline nonlinearly. Because each extra dollar applied to principal reduces the interest accruing on that principal for every subsequent month. In concrete terms, adding $200 per month to the highest interest debt does not simply reduce the debt by $200 per month. It reduces total interest paid by an amount that grows larger the earlier in the payoff cycle it is applied. This is why the first year of aggressive debt payoff is the most leveraged year. Not because the balances shrink the fastest, they do not, But because the interest reduction compounds backward through time in a way that makes early extra payments worth significantly more than later ones. The third thing that had to change was the environment that produced the debt in the first place. Not by eliminating it. You cannot eliminate New York City, and you cannot eliminate emergencies, and you cannot retroactively change a salary. But by building a structure that prevents the next gap from being filled with credit. A buffer of $500, then $1,000, that exists specifically to absorb the category of expense that previously went on a card. This buffer does not feel important until the emergency arrives. When the emergency arrives, it is the most important thing she has ever built. Debt payoff without a buffer is fragile. Every unexpected expense, and in New York City, unexpected expenses arrive with reliable frequency, interrupts the payoff plan and resets progress. The buffer is not savings. It is structural debt prevention. It costs nothing to maintain once built and eliminates the most common reason people abandon debt payoff plans before completion. The last thing, the one that nobody discusses at the same volume as interest rates and payment strategies, is identity. Debt persists partly because the behaviors that created it feel like normal life. The credit card gets used because that is what credit cards are for. The gap gets filled because the gap needs to be filled. The minimum gets paid because the minimum keeps everything quiet. These behaviors are not stupid or weak. They are deeply habitual, reinforced by years of repetition, and they will reassert themselves the moment the plan gets difficult. The payoff happens financially through mathematics. It becomes permanent through identity, through the gradual, consistent practice of being someone who routes money differently, who treats the debt payoff as non-negotiable, who builds the buffer before the lifestyle, who looks at the number every week instead of avoiding it. $23,400. She paid it off in 31 months. Not because her salary doubled, not because she got lucky, because she stopped averting her eyes, picked a sequence, protected the plan with a buffer, and treated the debt as